Scheme Make Along. We're now up to part 4, and this week we're going to complete our body panels of our sweaters. And our design is really starting to come together. I hope you like how it's shaping up. So for our first 3 parts, we've been repeating the same steps for the front and the back of our design. This week will be a little bit different as we introduce some front and back neck shaping. So let me introduce you to our new techniques in part 4. I'm going to be showing you on a smaller half sample, but your piece will work both sides. This section is all about how we shape our necklines and our shoulders.
Part 4 is the final part working the front and back of our sweater before we move on to our sleeves. And it's broken down into 6 steps. So our first step is this larger lilac stocking stitch stripe. And although this looks very plain compared to the rest of our jumper, we've got something special that we're going to add into this area later. Then our step 2 is working an orange mix stripe in stocking stitch. And our step 3 is working a mint mix garter stitch stripe. Before we get onto step 4, where we're working our pink mix and starting our neck shaping. So holding our middle stitches and starting our shoulder shaping and our neckline. Step 5, we're working on our neckline more with another stocking stitch stripe. And step 6, finishing off our shoulder with some short row shaping and casting off. This is also shown on a half front sample, and you'll be making both sides. So this shows a right side, and you'll also be following the instructions to work your left side. And this is also the first part where it isn't exactly the same for the front and the back. So this is a front panel with a slightly deeper neckline shaping, and you'll also be following along with your pattern to make your back panel, which has got a shallower neckline but matches up with our shoulder seam. As this part also completes our front and back panels, we can start to see how all our parts so far work together, mixing those pattern stripes.
I'm now going to take you step by step through part 4, so grab your yarns, your needles and your project so far and come and work along with me.
To start step 1 of part 4, we want to bring in our lilac mix, and we're going to start off with a purl row. So we're going to pinch in our end, so leave an end, hold in to start. And we're working one of our raised colour change detail rows. So it's a purl row across, and just hold the ends in place at the beginning. And we will wind them in when we can. And when you get to the end, we're going to take our work and turn and work another purl row back across our jumper. And when you get back over to the other side, just remember that your ends aren't twisted in yet, so your stitches might pull a bit long. So we're going to pull those tight, turn round, and we're now continuing working stocking stitch. So we're going to be knitting on the front and purling on the back. And we can now also twist in our ends. And you want to work this section and step 1 for a total of 18 rows of stocking stitch if you're working on a size 1. And if you're working on a size 2 or 3, you want 20 rows of stocking stitch in total. So that includes your colour change row. And so you want 20 rows in total for a size 2 and 3, and 18 rows in total of stocking stitch for a size 1. So I'm twisting in my ends and I'm knitting on the front and purling on the back for my stocking stitch block, which is step 1. Once you've completed the right amount of rows for step 1 and your large lilac mix stripe, we're now going to move on to step 2, and we're bringing in our orange. I want to snip my lilac. And for step 2, we're working an orange mix stripe, starting off with our colour change details. So we're starting off with a purl row. So coming in, pinching that end in place, because I'll twist in my ends in a later row. So I'm coming across and I'm going to purl the entire row. And when I get to the end of my row, I'm going to turn, and then row 2 for step 2 is a purl row again, as we're now working our stocking stitch. So I'm going to purl this row, and then this step has 4 rows in total. So I'm purling this row, I'm going to knit the next row, and then I'm going to purl my final row 4 for step 2. So that's this purl row, then 1 knit row, and then a final purl row in our orange mix for step 2. And when you're coming back across with your knit row, remember you can twist in your ends. So your step 2 will be 4 rows in total. When I get to the end, my last row of step 2, I'm now ready for step 3. So I'm going to take my orange mix and snip it. And step 3 is worked in my mint mix. And I'm now going to work a stripe of garter stitch. And so we're just knitting across backwards and forwards. And I'm working to a size 1. So I'm going to work 6 rows in total of garter stitch. If you're working a size 2, you're also going to work 6 rows. And if you're working a size 3, you're going to work 8 rows. So garter stitch is knitting both ways. So I'm going to knit and also twist in my ends at the beginning of my first row. And then I'm going to continue knitting my mint mix for my size 1 for 6 rows. When I've completed the right amount of garter stitch rows for my step 3, I'm ready to start my step 4. And this is also where in this part, we start to differ from the front and the back as we begin our neck shaping. So I'm going to snip my mint mix. And step 4 is worked in our pink mix. And I'm going to introduce that. And I'm going to pinch my 2 ends together. And I'm working 1 row of knit in my pink mix. So I can twist my ends in as I go. And this is my row 1 of step 4. And before I start any shaping in my step 4, I want to work a total of, for a size 1, 4 rows of stocking stitch, and for a size 2 and 3, 6 rows of stocking stitch. So stocking stitch is where we knit on the front and purl on the back. So I'm working my row 1, which is a knit row, and then my next row will be a purl row, and I'll copy that, repeat until I have 4 rows in total, as I'm working to a size 1. Once you've worked your first stocking stitch rows for step 4, we're going to mark our centre of our jumpers. So I'm working on a half front at the moment, so I know my centre point, but you want to mark 49 stitches in for a size 1, 57 stitches in for a size 2, and 65 stitches in for a size 3. And you can use your stitch marker and place that in your central stitch. And so mine is at the edge as I'm working a half front. We then want to mark the edge of our neck. So we've got our central point. And then for a size 1, I'm going to count 13 stitches across. For a size 2, you're going to count 14 stitches. And for a size 3, you're going to count 16 stitches. So don't include the stitch marker, and then count. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then I'll place my stitch marker in that 13th stitch. So in the amount of stitches for your size, place your stitch marker. You're then also going to want to count the same amount of stitches out on the other side of your middle stitch marker. So you count both sides. This will now make your bottom of your neck a total of 27 stitches if you're working on a size 1, 29 stitches if you're working on a size 2, and 33 stitches if you're working on a size 3. So here this marks the bottom and the beginning of your neck. We're now going to be working each side separately. So I'm going to be showing you on this right side. So that's the right side of your panel when it's facing you. When your panel is flat, the right side facing you. So I'm going to start off with my row 1 of my right side, and I'm going to knit across until I get to my stitch marker. So I'm not going to work in the stitch where my stitch marker is. I'm going to knit all the way across up until my stitch marker, my first stitch marker. And we're continuing in stocking stitch. So I'm knitting across on the right side of my work until I reach my stitch marker. And when I get up to my stitch marker, I'm not going to knit the stitch on my stitch marker, and I'm going to leave those neck stitches. So that's as far as I'm knitting up to. I'm then going to turn my work, and I'm now going to purl back across. But first, to start my shaping, I want to purl 2 together. So how I do that is I take my needle and I go through 2 stitches as if I was purling, but going through 2 stitches at once. I'm going to yarn round and pull through, and work them as one. So I've decreased and I've made 2 stitches into one. I'm then going to purl all the way back across my row. And then when you get to the end, I'm going to turn. And I'm now going to start step 5 of my right side. So I'm going to snip my pink. And step 5 is worked in my red mix. And we're starting off with a colour change row. So I'm going to purl across. So I'm purling across, I'm joining in my red. So I pinch my ends together. Just pull those ends to secure. And I'm purling across. So I'm purling up until my stitch marker. And you can start to see a bigger gap forming here, and that's where we're working this side independently and just holding our neck, and you will have your other side still on the needle. I'm going to turn my work. And I'm purling back across, but first I want to purl 2 together again, and this is shaping the slope of our neck. So I'm going through 2 stitches with my needle and working a purl through both of those to make 2 stitches into one. I'm then going to purl back across the rest of my row. And then when you get to the end of the row, just hold those stitches so you don't pull them too big where they're not fully secure yet. I'm going to turn. And we want to work 2 more rows in this step. So I'm working 1 row knit, again, up until my stitch marker and then back across in purl. And because I'm working a knit row and I'm on the front, I can now twist in my ends to secure. So I'm working 1 more row in knit and then 1 in purl. So step 5 has 4 rows in total. We're now up to step 6 and we want to join in our orange mix. So I'm going to take my red mix, snip that, and bring in my orange. And for row 1 of step 6, I'm going to purl across and I'm just working the stitches that we've been building up for our shoulder. So I'm working up until my stitch marker on the right side of my panel still, and I'm just going to purl across as we're doing a raised colour change row. I'm just holding those ends so they don't pull too loose. And And when you get to your last stitch, I'm going to turn. And then for row 2, I'm going to purl 2 together. So I'm coming through 2 stitches at once, making sure my yarn is at the right side first. So I'm coming through 2 stitches at once and purling them as if they were one. So I'm making 2 stitches into one. And then I'm going to purl across my row. When you get to the end of the row, just remember not to pull those last 2 stitches as they're not secured yet. So once you've worked them, you can pull tight, turn your work. And we're now ready for row 3 of step 6. And we're going to knit across all our orange mixed stitches. And as we're knitting and we're on the front of our work, we can now also twist in our ends. Once I get to the end, I'm going to turn my work. And for row 4, I'm now purling. And as I'm working to a size 1, I'm going to purl 16 stitches. If you're working to a size 2, you're going to purl 20 stitches. And if you're working to a size 3, you're going to purl 23 stitches across. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I'm then going to slip the next 3 stitches. So I'm coming in as if I were purling and I'm going 1, 2, 3. And then I'm ready to turn my work. And now I'm going to knit back across those 19 stitches. So I'm working to a size 1, so I have 19 stitches. If you're working to a size 2, you'll have 23 stitches. And if you're working to a size 3, you'll have 26 stitches. So as we've slipped, our yarn will jump slightly at the back. So don't pull too tight for our first stitches. And so we're working those stitches with knit, and I'm just going to knit across. And this is working some short row shaping, and this helps with the slope of our shoulder. And that completes my row 5. And now because I'm working to a size 1, I'm going to turn my work and then I'm going to cast off all my shoulder stitches. If you're working to a size 2 or a size 3, you have a further 2 more rows that you'll work before you cast off. So just follow along with the pattern. And so now I'm going to cast off. And I'm going to cast off knitwise. So to do that, I want to knit one stitch, knit my second stitch, and then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to bring my first stitch over my second to cast it off. I'm going to knit the next stitch and then take the first stitch and bring it over the second stitch to cast off. So I'm going to knit one and then take that first loop and bring it over my second loop to leave one on my needle before I knit the next stitch. And I'm going to work this all the way down the row. Until I've cast off all the stitches of the shoulder on the right hand side of my jumper panel. And as you get to the last stitch, bring your stitch over, pull your stitch long. You can move your needle out of the way. Give yourself an end snip and take that tail and put it through that loop and pull to secure. And you've now completed the right side of your panel. And you can see we've worked a sloped section for that step 6 to create our shoulder slope and the shaping of our neck. Now, as I've only worked a half front, I've now worked my piece, but you're going to want to follow the steps on the other side to complete your left shoulder. And then once you've completed the steps to work your way up and cast off your left shoulder, that's the left of the panel facing you, we then want to work a yarn stitch holder to take our neck stitches off. So again, you want to take a contrasting yarn, give yourself a nice long length, place that on one of your tapestry needles, make a knot at one end so it doesn't pull all the way through. And then you're going to slip your neck stitches off your needle and onto your yarn. So I'm coming with my needle and I'm just taking those stitches off and slipping them onto my yarn to hold them while we use our needle for our back panel. So they're now held, so they're not going to fall off, and they're ready to work when we pick up our neck. And so once you've worked both sides, you will have completed your front panel. And this is our first section where we're not doing a complete exact copy repeat for our back. Our back has slightly different shaping. So you can see here on my back panel, and I've worked the left side of my back panel, that our shaping is slightly different. So you want to just follow the techniques that we've learned in this section along with your pattern to shape your back panel of your piece. And once you've completed both of those, you've worked all your front and back panels of your sweater. And you can also see, once you've worked both your panels, that your shoulders will match up, but your front has a lower curve than the back of your jumper. So your front panel is with your lower curve of your neck, and the back is where it's slightly higher up.
Once you've worked on your front panel, you want to repeat using the same techniques following your pattern to complete your back panel shaping. So you might think that the pattern design is a little bit plain this week, but the larger striped section will get a little bit of special treatment in a later part. And if you couldn't guess it, I'm a maximalist, so I wouldn't just leave you with some plain stripes, although you might want to leave them plain on your final piece. I hope you're as excited as me with our mystery reveal so far. I just love how our body of this jumper is coming together. I hope you enjoyed working on this next part of your make-along. And don't forget to share your progress with us by using the hashtag @ProSkiMal. You also want to tag myself, Katie Jones Knit, and Hobby in your photos. Plus, there's the Hobby Facebook make-along group, where you can share your tips and tricks and join in with everyone else working on the make-along. I'll see you next week and happy making!